Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Small Man Podcast. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing my good friend Sarah. Hi, Sarah. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. Let's start off. Why don't you introduce yourself, the name of the school that you train at, and the color belt?
Yeah, so my name is Sarah Medoff. I train out of Marcelo Garcia's academy here in Kailua. I do supplement some of my no-gi training at my husband's gym, which is Praxis Hawaii. I am a brown belt, and I've been training for about, I think it's 9 years, a little over 9 years. Yeah, so I feel like it ages me a little bit, but pains me to say.
Ha 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 ha. 9 years. Okay. So let's talk about when you first got started, right? What got you into jujitsu?
So growing up, I actually never did any sort of mat sports. So I didn't do judo. I never wrestled. I didn't even know really what jujitsu was. So I started when I was about 7 to about 12. I swam competitively, and then in middle school, my mom put me in swimming for school, but then also cross country and track. So I had only done like very independent, like very mundane sports that were just, running and it's just you in the pavement or swimming and it's just you in the pool. I never did any sort of like team sports or definitely not any combat sports. So I had a family friend at the time. I was about 27, right about to turn 28, who suggested that I put my oldest daughter in jujitsu. So I started her off at Island Jiu-Jitsu. She was about, I think, maybe 7 years old. And at first, it didn't really spark my interest. Like the first day I had brought her, I watched her practice. But bringing her continuously over the course of like 7, 8 months, I started kind of getting the bug where I would watch her practice and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. It's kind of cool how people like move their body. And I really thought it was super badass. So I was like, I'm gonna try it. So I ended up jumping into my first jujitsu class at Zapatero. And I still remember we did kimuras from close guard. And like instantly in that first class, I was like hooked. So I went home, I grabbed my little 7-year-old daughter, and I just like practiced kimuras from close guard over and over with her. And I just remember doing like the 1, 2, 3 step, like, okay, step one, grab her wrist. Step two, get to your elbow. And I just couldn't wait to come back the next day. And since that first class, I've just been 100% just into jujitsu. So
Wow, that's an interesting story that your daughter started it off first. I'm just curious, when you were going there watching your daughter, did anyone try to recruit you or tell you, "Hey, you're coming here all the time, so why don't you give it a try?"
not really, actually. Everybody was super welcoming at Island Jiu-Jitsu. They really, they welcomed all the kids. At the time, it was really small. So when she first started, it's funny to think about because it's such a big school now and they have such a strong kids team. But at the time, it was like maybe 8 kids. And they had all the pictures on the walls of all the 8 kids training. And then over probably about like 3 months into her training there, it just started like really trickling in. And then by the time she ended up leaving Island Jiu-Jitsu, I mean, the kids class was like super filled. So I think as like the parents, there were some parents that started like jumping in because they would bring their kid and they were interested. And the coaches at Island were always super welcoming and, they would greet me and they would talk to me, but nobody ever tried to like forcefully or suggest or like recruit or anything like that. So it was kind of just something that I was watching and it kind of just sparked my interest organically.
Huh, interesting. So, does your daughter still train or did she kind of stop?
Both my daughters stopped actually, but my oldest daughter stopped because she started wrestling for school. And she got really into that. And so my husband, Scott, was like, I think she's a junior now, but at the time when she first started wrestling, she was in 8th grade. She did both wrestling and jujitsu. And then by ninth grade, I'm so sorry. I got to check my door. So sorry about that.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. Sounds like a big old dog.
Sorry, it was the mailman. But where were we? Oh, yeah, Maya. So my oldest started wrestling in 8th grade. And she was doing wrestling and jujitsu at the same time. And then she started doing club wrestling. And so then it kind of became a lot to do wrestling and jujitsu. And I think sometimes when she was wrestling, she was kind of carrying over some
Mm,
bad habits from jujitsu. So we kind of made the decision just to pull her out of jujitsu temporarily, just put her in wrestling. And then my youngest daughter was doing jujitsu up until about 2 years ago. And then she started gymnastics and really fell in love with that sport. And so you know, I still bring both of them to jujitsu classes when I'm able to, because I don't want them to lose that skill set, but I also don't want to force a passion on them that they're not really that passionate about. And I also feel like jujitsu is always going to be there. I started when I was 27 years old. Um, they can always go back to it later on down the road. But something like wrestling and gymnastics, you have a really short, small window to be competitive. So I figure now is the time to kind of let them explore that.
I was just talking to somebody about wrestling. Like, I mean, you can wrestle in high school, you can wrestle in college. I guess I don't know that there's anything beyond that where you can stay actively competitive. I don't like jujitsu. You can be 7 years old, hang out at the mat and roll with people, but like, I don't know, 7-year-old wrestlers get together and try to grapple with each other, you know?
Yeah, no, it's probably not a great idea. Although there's that Helen, I forget her last name, but she just won some big wrestling tournament I think this year. She's about 33, but I mean she's been wrestling her whole entire life and she's like she is the best of the best. So that makes sense, but I think trying to be a 30-something-year-old or 40-something-year-old trying to enter wrestling would be a little bit difficult. So I worry
Yeah, a
about my
little challenging.
yeah.
Okay, so you got started at Zapatero.
Mhm.
That was at that's like where the concept is now, right? Is that the one by
So
Coho Street
that
or is it somewhere
wasn't
else?
where, I initially I didn't start at that location. So, I ended up they moved, to Nimitz, I believe, and then,
Right.
so once they opened up the new location on Nimitz, that's when I started, and my ex-husband at
Uh,
the time had a couple friends who were black belts over there. So originally, I was just gonna start at Island Jiu-Jitsu with Maya, but he really wanted me to start at Zapatero, because all his friends were there and whatnot. So we ended up pulling Maya out of Island Jiu-Jitsu, putting her at Zapatero, and then I started over there as well. So, and then I stayed at Zapatero for about, I want to say 3 or 4 years. I got my blue belt under Edmund Lee. And then right around COVID, um, COVID was just such a weird time where gyms were closed. They were allowing very limited contact. And one of my friends from Zapatero ended up switching to Trickster. And so then I ended up going to some of the open mats at Trickster, and they were a lot more, during the COVID time, a lot more open in the gym. They allowed a lot more training. And so I ended up just making the switch over to Trickster.
yeah, I remember Trickster opened up like because I was at UFC. UFC was still closed and Trickster opened up, so a bunch of people that used to train at UFC went over to Trickster because they were open.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they were a smaller independent gym, weren't controlled by corporate
Yeah. And
people,
they're
so
like
they.
in the boonies of Kapolei, so they're a little hidden. And there's some police officers that train over there too, so I'm sure that might have helped. I don't know. Maybe not. Yeah.
So you know when you started in the earlier days, like at Zapatero, was it was it mainly like still male dominated classes?
It was. We did have a couple girls that were training there. So Mel would stop by.
Hmm.
And so she was a black belt. Keiko was a brown belt at the time. And then my training partner, Amber, was a blue belt when I first started. And so there were some girls that trained, but it was mostly guys. And it was funny because when I was thinking about some of the questions for this interview, I was kind of reflecting on um my experience going through like the lower ranked belt, so like white blue belt, and what I observe now, a white and a blue belt go through now, and when I started I'm very playful on the mats. I like to have a good time and I like to joke around. So none of the beatings were unwarranted, I'm sure. But I think probably the first 2 years just getting smashed into the mat and like, some black belt would come in and we would go to roll and then I would just be like stuck in bottom mount for like 5 minutes. And those were like all of my rolls coming up. So it did really, and like it for me personally, it made me hungry to like keep coming back because I was like,
Mm,
I want to get good at this. I don't want to be getting smashed all the time. So it really developed it like it kind of forced or it helped me develop like a really profound respect for the sport and love and dedication. And I think I don't know if that is something like all people would endure coming up. I think some people might look at that and be like, you know what, screw this. I'm done. I'm not going to get killed. Like, I don't want to get murdered and fight for my life every afternoon. But for me, that was like, that kept me coming around. But now, when I went to other gyms, there's like different cultures at different gyms. And we didn't have a lot of girls at Zapatero, but like for example, Trickster has like a really good, strong girls team over there, and so they have like a really strong women's class. I think they run them on Fridays, and all of the upper belt women there are very supportive of the white belts and the blue belts coming in, and so I do think that's like a change for the positive. I'm glad
mm,
there are like the white blue belts that have, a more comfortable entry into jujitsu than maybe what have I had. And then even comparing my experience to some of the women who came up like way before me, who were really rolling with all guys. I mean, they had it really, really rough. So
mm.
I think maybe every couple years it just gets easier and easier to like enter the sport. So I think that's a good thing.
That definitely a good thing, like an evolution of the sport, right? Recognizing it's not kill or be killed. It's more enjoying the beauty of jujitsu, right? But you're right about like a lot of people would just say, "Forget this. I'm done." Like I'm going home, like physically and mentally destroyed. Like, why do I keep doing this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I guess the people that take it on as a challenge, those are the people that stick it out and keep moving forward.
I think so. And I've always said, I was like, I think it's easier to start jujitsu as a female rather than a male because although I would get beaten up in all my roles, it was always very playful. And I mean, like I said, I joke around on the mats all the time too. So it was fun and it was lighthearted. But I feel like when I've seen, white belt guys kind of come in, especially if they kind of have an ego or they're young and they're strong and they're fast and they're a little reckless. I mean, they really get worked a lot harder and, like, maybe in not such a playful way, so, yeah, so I think the ones that, like, survive through that and come out of that, like, they're really in it for the long haul, and they're gonna stick with the sport.
Yeah, yeah, it's humbling, and the sooner you recognize that, then the sooner you start to progress. Yeah. Who do you think were like some of the early influencers on your jujitsu style?
Yeah, I was kind of reflecting on this, and when I was coming up I've been to a bunch of different gyms now. I started at Zapatero, I went over to Trickster, I've cross-trained at H&L, Concept, I would go visit, stop by K-Team occasionally, and, now I'm at Marcelo's, and at every gym I've been at, I've always had been really blessed with having really great coaches. But, like in a lot of gyms, there's maybe like one or two students that the coaches really gravitate to and really want to help succeed. And it's usually like the younger athletes that have like a really clear future. And because I started a little later, I was a mom with two kids. Um, the early part of my jujitsu career, I was a single mom with two kids. So I really had a lot of conflicting responsibilities or competing responsibilities. So I never got that real one on one attention from any coaches. And now being at Marcelo's, I will say Marcelo does a really great job at like giving me a lot of that attention. So he'll always give me feedback and he'll always give me direction. He'll correct me. And it isn't anything special about me. He really does that to all of the students there. So, and he's created a really nice environment at that gym where everybody is very welcome and respected and part of the community. It's not cliquey. Like if you start off there as a white belt and you're new, like they welcome you with open arms. And that really comes from, in my opinion, like the coach. So Marcelo does a great job at spending time with everybody at the gym, from like the highest ranked, most senior black belts to like the trial white belt guy that comes in. So I think having that environment has definitely helped my jujitsu because it's a very comfortable, easygoing environment. But I would say like the biggest influencer on my jujitsu journey, as cliche as this sounds, would have to be given to my husband, Scott. But not necessarily for the reasons you might think. So typically when, a girl has a spouse or a partner who is more experienced and is higher ranked than them, that husband or boyfriend will spend a lot of time with their, girlfriend or wife and help them and, kind of give them all these techniques that they use. So when me and Scott first started dating, it was like the first time I had dated somebody in jujitsu, and I was like, great, he can teach me all these cool stuff. Because I was like a brand new blue belt at the time. He was like a pretty seasoned brown belt. But when we first started dating, there was like none of that. So we kept our jujitsu lives very separate. And I think that was really beneficial because it kind of forced me to figure out what works for me and my game rather than him imposing the things he does on me. Um, and so, like, as I'm saying this, that he's not really had a large influence on my technique, you might be thinking, like, well, then why is he so influential? But I think Scott has been really great at guiding me on more of like the philosophical aspect of jujitsu.
Mm.
And so, like, we've had pretty deep, profound conversations on like, well, what is your goal when you go to training? When you're in a match, like he'll give me feedback, like you have such tunnel vision on the thing you're trying to do that you're ignoring what your partner is giving you. And so he carries the same methodology in his classes, and that's like how he teaches his students. And it's been really helpful because once he did start getting more involved in my jujitsu in that way, it was probably right around purple belt when I started doing more nogi, because he's exclusively like a nogi player. I prefer the gi. There was one year where I decided to do Nogi Worlds, and I started training Nogi seriously about 3 months prior to that tournament. And that's kind of when he started becoming more involved. And I think when he started giving me this guidance, it's like, yeah, we were talking about maybe one position, but the way he thought about it and the way we talked about it, it was like concepts that I could apply to different positions and all positions. And that when I was able to kind of switch my thinking and like stop being so reactive in my roles and start being a little bit more strategic and calculating, I noticed a huge difference in my progression. And like the people I was training with at the time were also noticing like a huge difference in my progression. And I think that I've never gotten from any other coaches or mentors. So I think that's been probably the most influential component of like my jujitsu, my growth in the sport. And a lot of my success in the sport has been because of the way I've changed my thinking around my roles. Um, but in terms of like technique, I think AJ probably has given me the biggest he's been most AJ Mendoza from Day by Day. He's probably the most influential on like the way I roll because he's similar size to me. He's a little bit heavier, but his style is more compatible with my body type and my game. And really all the Day by Day guys that train over there, all the Kaniel Hey boys that I also train with, have been very influential on my actual technique and the things I do. And then the last person I'd really want to call out is Jeremy Nita at Trickster. So Jeremy, it's especially in if you're thinking about competing in like an IBJJF tournament or a points-based tournament, a lot that comes into play is like your strategy, your competition strategy, because I believe like a lot of the people that the winners aren't necessarily reflective of the best person in that bracket, and I can say that having won. There's been matches that I've participated in where I've won But I knew at the bottom of my heart, if we replayed that match 10 times, I would maybe have a 50% success rate. And I got that win because in that 5, 6 minutes of the match, I was able to play the point system better or, play the clock a little bit better than my opponent. And that really came out of attending Jeremy's comp classes. So he'll run comp classes on Saturdays at Trickster, and they were so helpful for me to like think about how to strategize in a points-based tournament. So I think without that, I don't know if I would have achieved a lot of the success that I've had in IBJJF without his comp classes and like that aspect of competing and competition jujitsu.
I think that's a very underrated part of jiu-jitsu, right? Everybody looks at the technique and execution, but a strategy, a game plan, understanding the rule set, that's almost as important as how well you can do your jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You said it could be the defining factor between a win and a loss.
Yeah. So, and I also think that, like, I know some people, they prefer more of the submission based grappling styles, and I think those are always fun and exciting. But I do think, I like to think about jujitsu as like an art of controlling the other person, and that's what the points are centered around, is control. So I feel like, and I think it was Jeremy that used to preach this, like you get the control and then the submission comes after. Like it will come a lot easier. So I think even if you're not competing or you're not planning to compete, kind of playing in that way will help you understand the dynamics of positions a little bit better. So I think it's just good in general.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. What do you think were some of the bigger challenges you faced as you've come along in your jiu-jitsu journey?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this a lot lately, especially as a mother who is, I don't compete a whole lot during the year, but I try to go up, once or twice a year to compete in mainland tournaments and whatnot. And I do think as a mom, we have different challenges than the general other competitive jujitsu populations or population. And partly because anytime you compete in jujitsu, it requires a good amount of sacrifice. So you're sacrificing your social life and you're sacrificing quote unquote fun. And, as like a 20 something year old, that's a huge sacrifice. And typically that's well received and applauded, and people that those sacrifices are met with a lot of admiration. But I think as a mom, we do sacrifice all of those things to train and to compete and be successful. But the other thing that I think is different is our sacrifices are not always admired because we have kids. So, for example, when I'm getting ready for, the bigger mainland tournaments specifically, I'm very dedicated to my training and that dedicated to working out and eating right. And sometimes that takes me away from the household. And so there's times where the kids, Scott's all at home on a Saturday hanging out, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go run to the gym and go practice, and I'll be gone for 3, 4 hours. Um, there's been times where I've been working all day and then practice starts at 7, it's 6 o'clock, and I'm like, oh, damn, like I didn't prep dinner. I didn't make dinner. So I go to practice and then I'm like rushing home at 9 o'clock, whipping something up for the kids, so they can have dinner at 9:30. And a lot of people can look at that and be like, she's neglectful. She's not a good mom. She's choosing jujitsu over whatever. So there's that. There's those hurdles that you kind of have to overcome and navigate through, but also like your self-guilt of like feeling like you're not fully present in your household or you're not fully present for your kids for the sake of going up to compete in Master Worlds. And sometimes I do get to those moments where I'm like driving in the car on the way to practice and I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm not gonna, like, if I win, it's not like my salary is gonna bump up 30% or I'm gonna buy a bigger home or something. But, you have to push those thoughts out and you have to kind of drown out those judgments, because at the end of the day, it's not wrong and it's not selfish to do things for you, and I have to constantly remind myself like I am providing for my kids. I do spend so much time with them. I give them what they need. Um, I have conversations with them. They talk to me. Um, and it's positive for them, especially the fact that I have two little girls, to see their mom not lose herself along the way with motherhood and a career. And so that's what I try to focus on. But I'm not going to sit here and say it's always easy. You still go through all of those challenges but at the end of the day, I always try to keep it fun. Training is like my little me time, and I always come back home feeling better, feeling refreshed. And because I've trained for a couple hours, I can be more present with my kids and my house and my household and more patient. So at the end of the day, I'm doing them a favor. So
What what makes you the happiest about jujitsu?
I think it's everything. I think jujitsu has a really amazing community. And I like creating community where I go. And so, like, for example, if I go to the gym, if I go to UFC, I don't really know anybody. Even if I do develop friends, we see each other, we say hi, and then we go on our machines and we're very isolated in our workouts. Jiu-jitsu, it's kind of this perfect blend of competition and camaraderie, So you're like training with your teammates and you're really trying to kill them and like break their arm or something. But at the same time, it's like you're making each other better and you have this end goal of making each other better. And I don't know if there's a lot of sports that really emulate that. I'm sure there is. I just don't participate in them. So I will say that I've been really blessed with being at gyms. All of the gyms I've been at, Zapatero, Trickster, my kids used to go to H&L, Marcelo's, Praxis Workshop, all of these gyms, Vessel, they all have really great environments. And it's really a community that gets built within a gym. And that's what really makes me happy. It's going and training, but it's really going and training and seeing those people and my training partners and my friends.
I have to 100% agree with you that on the community side, yeah, that support group, people that you can lean on. And I mean, I always think about it like the people that I see there at jujitsu, if I didn't do jujitsu, I probably wouldn't know them.
Yeah,
We don't,
exactly.
you know,
Yeah. Our
they
paths
have
wouldn't
different
cross.
professions.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the people I train with, they're like 20 something year old kids. Like,
Yeah, me too.
I mean, where would I meet up with 25-year-old kids, right? Except my son.
Exactly. Yeah.
What are some of the lessons that you've gotten from jujitsu that, you can apply to your life or that you even try to share with your kids?
Yeah, there's so many. I think resilience is a big one. Especially not having a mentor, like one mentor throughout the 9 years of my training, um, and having that like really steep learning curve at first, when I first started as a white blue belt, getting beat up all the time in the best possible way, not complaining. But sticking it through and having that determination and that tenacity and that resilience of still keep showing up is a huge one. I do believe you can get that from a lot of sports, though. I think the biggest lesson that jujitsu has taught me, as well as everybody, is like you got to manage your ego. As successful as you become, as like even if you win every tournament that you ever enter, there's always somebody better. And you always have to keep your ego in check. And I think once you start letting your ego get the best of you and you start kind of getting maybe a little cocky or thinking that you're a little bit better than everybody else, that's going to really affect your experience on the mat. It's going to affect who you choose to roll with. It's going to affect how you roll with those people, because then it's like every round becomes not wanting to lose and about winning. And there's going to be a stagnation that might happen, in my opinion. So I think, that was the one thing I've noticed as well is I have met like high ranking jujitsu practitioners and they all seem very humble. I mean, even Marcelo, who is like the goat of the goat. I mean, you talk to him, he is the most humble, nicest guy that I was very surprised with that. So And then I think in general, just for like a safety measure, you always got to keep your ego in check, which sometimes I have problems with that, like I get caught in a submission. I'm like, no, I can get out of it. I can get out of it. And then I end up hurting myself. And I'm like, I should have just tapped. It would have been
Mhm.
fine. I should have just tapped. So it's a constant reminder that we're still mortal and, we got to remain humble and it's all for fun and you should be having fun while you're doing it.
That's just the bottom line about jujitsu, having fun,
Yeah.
right? Like I said, if it's not fun, why would you keep doing it, right?
Yeah.
Well, initially it wasn't fun, right? Because you're getting beat up. But at some
That's the
point
weird thing though. That was always fun to me. I was
it
like,
was.
I had an older brother who would beat me up all the time. So to me, I was like very used to it, because it wasn't ever like when I say, black belts would come in and roll hard with me or whatnot, it wasn't ever in a malicious way. It wasn't like I
Mm.
felt like they really were trying to hurt me. Um, so it was like a puzzle. It was like a hurdle that I had to get over. I was like, I got to figure this out. Like, I can't let this person do this to me. I should be doing this to them. And so I think that's kind of what kept me coming back, and that's what kept the interest. There was actually a black belt when I was a white belt that I remember telling me at Zapatero. He was like, I kind of envy you as a white belt. And I was like, what? Why? I want to be a black belt, like beating everybody up. No, because as a white belt, like every role is exciting to you. Like every role poses challenges and obstacles and hurdles, and you know, every training partner gives you that. But once you start moving up in the ranks and you start kind of acquiring more skills, it's harder and harder to find interesting roles and stimulating roles. Um, so that's really how it was as a white belt for me. It was every role was fun and stimulating and challenging. So.
Right. So you do compete, right? So I always ask people if they remember their first competition and how that went.
Yes, I do. I remember my first competition. It was probably about a year after I started training. I was a white belt. That was the biggest bracket I've ever had in Hawaii. I can't remember if it was a Naga or a Triple Crown, but I want to say they ended up just squishing a couple weight classes into one within like maybe a 20-pound range. But I think I had about 5 matches. And I remember like my tactic because I didn't know enough about the point system. I didn't have a strategy, to play the clock and play the points and do things at what time and whatnot. So my strategy as a white belt was to pull guard, pull them into close guard, keep breaking their posture until they were really tired, and then hit a sweep on them. So it'd be like a hip bump sweep or a flower sweep. And so that kind of took me through the whole entire bracket for my first tournament. And then my last match, the girl was really strong. I pulled her into close guard, couldn't really break her posture, but because I was attacking the whole time, I ended up getting the decision. And then I ended up winning. So it was pretty exciting.
Wow, wow, that's pretty good. I mean, even though you said you didn't have a strategy, you did have a strategy,
Yes, I
right?
had
You
a
had a
little
kind of a
strategy.
plan. Yeah, you went in there trying something.
Yeah, as I went through the bracket, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna keep doing close guard. That's the only way they stay still. So
Okay, all right, that's good. So when was the last competition?
last competition was in end of March. I went up for Masters International, I think it's called. So it's the smaller tournament that happens right before Adult Worlds. Um and it's a 4-star tournament, so it's ranked really high for IBJJF. That's kind of why I did it. And it was in Long Beach. My sister lives up there, so it was a last minute decision. Went to go do it. Ended up booking the flights, registering like right at the cutoff. Didn't have a lot of people in my bracket. I would have had 2 matches. First match, the girl didn't show, so I went straight into the final. But I was telling my sister after, I was like, it was a good tournament. It was nice that it was only one day, but I'm not entirely sure I would do it again. She was like, why not? And I was like, when I've gone to Master Worlds, it's exciting because like we as masters are like the main event. But going to Masters International right before the Adult Worlds, I was like, I feel like we're kind of like the crappy like pre-show before the actual like adult, cool kids come on stage. And then when I was like posting the podium picture, everybody was like, "Wow, you just won Worlds." And I was like, "No, I didn't win Worlds. I won the smaller tournament before Worlds, but thank you." So, but again, it's all for fun, so it was a good experience.
Oh, that's nice. So,
Yeah.
so what's next for a competition?
So I'm hoping to do Master Worlds in Vegas at the beginning of September, pending a small knee injury. So talking about ego, when I said you have to know to tap, I just had to relive that this past Sunday. So I have like a small MCL sprain. I'm back to rolling, light rolling right now. It hasn't been a week yet. It's been about 5 days. So I'm hoping by next week I'll be uh training a little bit more heavily. And then I think I have until like the 23rd to make a decision. So it'll be a last minute decision, but that's fun. So hopefully I can make it.
What do you think to this point has been your biggest accomplishment in your jujitsu?
I think the first time I won Worlds, Master Worlds, as a purple belt, I think that was a huge accomplishment for me. And at the time I competed under Trickster, so I was at Trickster, and so it's such a big school. We had such a big team that went up that year, and so it was really cool winning and then having the whole team and like Hawaii kind of be there to witness it and cheer me on. And it was a Master One featherweight division at purple belt, so it was still pretty competitive. I think I had about Oh, I forget the exact number. It was something like 46 girls in the bracket or
Oh,
something like that. It was a big bracket. I had 5 matches. Every match was really tough. Um, but I ended up uh getting the win. And that one was really special because it was like the first time I won Master Worlds. And the year prior to that, I had done Worlds at a blue belt as a blue belt. And I went into Blue Belt Worlds very confident, and I ended up losing second round. And it was just a silly mistake from me. I was attacking mostly the whole entire 5, 6 minutes of the round, but I kept looking at the scoreboard and all of my sub attempts weren't getting advantages. So I didn't really understand the scoring system and like I didn't have a strategy at that point. And so I got really frustrated. And so I went up for a sweep. We ended up both standing up. The girl ended up uh pulling guard, I think it was, and I ended up getting into her half guard and she ended up sweeping me in the last like 10 seconds of the match. And so that was like a really hard loss. That was the I always it when I do lose, I always have a point a couple days later where I'll think about the loss and I'll start, crying. I'm usually like working out, but that was the only time where it was like directly I walked off the mats and I just bawled my eyes out for like 2 hours straight. So to come back the next year as a purple belt, my first year at purple belt, and get the win was really, really special for me. So I think in terms of biggest accomplishments, that is the one that I think about.
that's quite an accomplishment from one year to the next. That was a big turnaround. Yeah, could have been easy to just get down on yourself, but I think it helped pushed you maybe a little harder.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. I always say, I hate losing. I like hate losing more than I love winning, as like one of my old training partners used to say. But I will say my biggest growth has happened from my losses. So, typically will figure out like what the heck happened and how I lost that match, and I might even start playing those guards or those positions on incorporating those things into my game. So I um like in the matches that I've won, I can loosely tell you what had happened, but in the matches that I've lost, I can tell you exactly what had happened, like at the exact time step almost. Like 1 minute into the match, I didn't have a whatever tight half guard, she passed, whatever it is. But those are the matches. The matches I've lost are the ones that I will hyper analyze and get the most growth from.
I always ask people that compete a lot, do you enjoy competing?
I do. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I still get really nervous and there's always that period like before I register, leading up to the tournament, even the day of the tournament, I'm like questioning, why am I doing this to myself? Because even though I like competing, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's easy. It takes like, it's a huge mental investment, it's a physical investment. Um, and then again, it comes down like for what, you know? Um, but and I will say, like, competing in jujitsu, it's not like doing other competitions, like maybe a CrossFit competition or a marathon where you're nervous, you do it and you're like, "Oh, it wasn't that bad," you know? I always tell people, I'm like, "Jujitsu is bad from, like, prepping to the day of the tournament to being in the bullpen to stepping on the mats during the tournament." Like, your adrenaline is pumping the whole entire time. Um, but once I get in the division and I get that first match going, it's like I get that, like, excited feeling, you know, where I'm like, this is the only time I can just roll unapologetically and really test myself. And win or lose after every tournament, like, I've never regretted competing. I've always felt accomplished and I felt, you know, happy that I stepped out and I did it and I tried it. So I do like that, and I like pushing myself out of my comfort zone, and that is, like, a huge way of pushing myself out of my comfort zone, so
Do you think some of that ties to like setting an example for your daughters?
I think so. I think in some ways it does. I do like that. To be honest, I think that's kind of a positive externality from it. Um, you know, it's like a byproduct, but to my core, I think even if I didn't have my kids, I like to have some sort of competitiveness or competition in my life. And so I think even without the kids there witnessing it, I would still be doing it. And I think I would probably be keep competing maybe a little bit more if I didn't have the kids. But I'm happy I have the kids. I think it's a good
Yeah.
trade-off. So, but it is I think having kids makes me try a lot harder. I think if I didn't have kids, I would still like competing, but maybe I wouldn't put as much effort and energy into winning. But because I have the girls, I want to show them what it's like to like work really hard and achieve something. And also the contrary of like what it's like to work really hard and not achieve something and grow from it, you know? And I think that's more of the important lesson for them is to not get kicked down just because you had a bad 5 minutes out on the mat. It's not reflective of all the time and energy that you've put into it leading up to it. It's not a reflection of your skill level. It's just, it wasn't your time during that 5 minutes of your match.
Are you a competitive person by nature?
I I would say no, but I think everybody around me would beg to differ. So I wanna say it's a playful competitiveness, so I'm not
Mm.
like, you know, I wouldn't like slip somebody a laxative in hopes that they're too fit to compete the night before, but like, you know, I do like competing and I like people giving me a hard time and I like working through the challenges. So I would say I'm probably a little competitive by nature, as much as that pains me to admit.
Where do you want to see your jiu-jitsu in 10 years?
I don't know, you know, like, even when I started jujitsu, I know there's a lot of people that are like, "Oh, like black belt is the goal, you know, road to black belt. I want to get my black belt." When I was a white belt, I really wanted color on my belt. I didn't want to be a white belt anymore. I just wanted to at least be a blue belt just to have some seniority on the mat. But I think the goals have always been kinda, like, nearsighted of, like, "Okay, I think I'm ready for my purple belt, I'm ready for my brown belt. Oh, I wanna compete in this jujitsu tournament." Uh, but in terms of, like, a long-term 10-year goal, I mean, I hope I'm still just training in some sort of capacity. You know, I imagine that over time, eventually now that I've been training for 9 years, I've been competing for 7, I've achieved a lot of the things that I would wanna achieve in terms of, like, winning worlds at purple belt, winning worlds at brown belt, um so, I don't know how much longer I'll be competing for, but I hope I'm still doing this and because it's like something that I love, it's something that keeps me happy. I think it grounds like your whole entire life. That's the thing about jujitsu. Like if you start, and I've seen this with people like, at my husband's gym at Praxis, we have white belts coming in and they're maybe not super athletic, maybe they don't really eat as super healthy, but they get hooked on the sport. And then I see they're like, we were just having a conversation last night about their gym routine, their diet routine. And so, like, starting to get into jujitsu, it's like it can just transform everything around you. You're like your whole entire life and your lifestyle. And so that's why I think it's been very positive for me. And I mean, my plan in 10 years is just to keep doing it because it's something that I love to do.
Yeah, so for me, right, it's obviously longevity. I want to keep doing it as long as I can too, right? So I think for me it's somewhat changed my mindset on how I train, who I train with, and what the goals are, right? Like you said, I mean, I mean, I do compete. It's becoming less attractive to me to compete now, but it's just being able to get on the mat and, move around still.
Yeah. Yeah, you do start. I also think the more skilled you get, the more selective you kind of have to be for your roles because, when I was a spazzy little white blue belt, it was a lot easier to just kind of put me in a straitjacket and hold me there if I was getting a little too aggressive. But and then there's that ego that comes into play. So like now that I'm a brown belt that's been training for 9 years, if I train with like a white belt or a blue belt guy, and I'm able to advance positions, they might start getting a little bit more aggressive. So I have to start being a little bit more choosy on who I roll with, because I really hate getting injured. It's like the worst thing.
You're right. You're right. Getting injured is just not, yeah, that's no good for us jujitsu people.
Yes.
Do you do any sort of recovery, or some people do preventive stuff? Do you do any of that?
I should, to be honest. I don't prioritize that as much. I should. I used to do some cold plunges intermittently. I will do the sauna intermittently, but not frequently enough where I'm really probably getting those benefits. Um, when I go to the gym, I try to do some PT exercises just to keep my like knees healthy. So like hamstring curls, some maybe band work. I have a really bad habit of like when I'm happy and healthy, those things fall at the wayside. And then when I get injured, I'm like, oh yeah, that needs to be a priority. I need to do all these things. Um, so I should probably incorporate those into my daily routine a little bit more. But I try to stretch as much as possible. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to turn off my notifications, but
It's okay.
I try to stretch as much as possible. I work out pretty consistently a couple times a week. So that's probably the extent of my preventative measures.
So if there's like another mom, right, that's a working professional that has kids that, is a competitor or trying to be a competitor, getting to jiu-jitsu, what kind of advice would you give them to help to try to balance off all these tugging priorities that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I would say take advantage of the opportunities that are given to you. So I know people often, because I work from home, so I'm fortunate enough to fit training in throughout the day. So it's not just at night. Um, and I know a lot of people look at my schedule and they're like, Sarah, you're training all the time. But part of the reason is because and this is another big challenge as a mom and for dads too, but people with kids is that your schedule isn't just dependent on your schedule. It's dependent on three, four other people's schedules and it's unpredictable. So, I could have this really solid plan of a training schedule for the week, but then maybe the kids get sick or, Scott's car breaks down or, there's some negative shock that happens where I got to adjust. So, there are times where I do train a lot because people will contact me and they're like, "Oh, do you want to jump in here? Do you want to jump in here?" And I'm like, "Yes, I can fit it in between my meetings or after work because I get off work pretty early since I work off the East Coast time." So I will bulk up the training just in case there's some crazy event that happens that like prevents me for to train for the next 3, 4 days. So I think that is probably the biggest advice. And, you just got to stay very proactive and like to say it bluntly, like laziness is not really an option. So you just have to fit everything in where you can. In terms of like cleaning the house and making dinner and grocery shopping and taking the kids to where they need to go and making sure you get your work done so you can afford all this travel. So yeah, but again, I think it structures your life and it's for the better ultimately. There's
Mm.
not a lot of wasted time.
Do you have you ever tried to maybe use the word recruit? Maybe recruit's not the right word, but try to get anybody to start up in jujitsu?
Oh, all the time. Yes, recruit is definitely the right word, and I try to do it every person I meet. You can ask any friend, like, in grad school, I started training probably like second year of grad school, and instantly it was like trying to get people to come train. I think the only time I will drop the prospects of training or the recruitment process is if I have a friend who looks at me and is like, "Oh yeah, that sounds kind of fun, but I really can't stand people sweat on me." And in that case, I'm like, "Oh, okay, never mind. It's not for you. Yeah, do CrossFit, do yoga, but like if you get grossed out by people sweat, definitely don't do jujitsu. Like it's a sweaty sport." So, but yeah, I do try to recruit.
What do you like? Um, what benefits or like what's the sales pitch? How do you try to get them started?
For me, it's like it's just changed my life so much um, for the positive that I just want everybody to feel that. I think when I started jujitsu, I had my kids very young. So I had my oldest a month before I turned 21. And then I had my youngest, when I was about 23, 24. Um, Going through two pregnancies, your body changes. At the time, was probably my self confidence was at its very lowest, especially being in your mid 20s. You're a mid 20 girl with two children. You're looking around, especially in Hawaii. The girls are so beautiful. Everybody's strutting their stuff in their bikinis. And so my confidence was like at an all-time low. I kind of started getting back into working out at the gym, but it was very cardio based, very mundane. And then when I started jujitsu, that was like really when everything in my life just fell into place. Like, and it wasn't even about my outward appearance. It was just the empowerment of a woman, I think, training and I would get beat up by the guys all the time, but just feeling like you could be competitive, with guys, with girls, it just gives you such an empowering feeling. And so I think I would try to recruit moms more than anything because I feel like as a mother, it's so easy to get caught up in like it's so easy to lose yourself in your marriage or your relationship or the households or the kids. And so it's so important to find something that is for you that gives you that empowering feeling. And for me, that's jujitsu. So that's why I try to sell it to everybody.
That's very well put. Yeah. Have you had a decent success ratio or so so?
I really haven't, to be honest. They kind of look at me and I think it doesn't help that I am trying to pitch it to them with like black eyes and like bruises all over my arms. And then we get into the horror stories, which I find to be funny, but not every girl
Right,
would
right.
participate. So I remember I was telling, and I really hope my friends from grad school see this podcast, but I remember telling two or three of my friends in grad school, I'm like, yeah, you should do jujitsu and it's so much fun. And they're like, "Well, what about the sweat?" And so I started going into all of these horror stories. "Oh, yeah, I was rolling with this guy, and I literally saw his sweat drip off his face and, like, drip into my eye or drip into my mouth." And they were like, "No, Sarah, you're disgusting. You're crazy. Why do you do this?" Um, so I think I gotta work on my sales pitch maybe a little bit more. Maybe I'll have a better success rate.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've had it happen to me too. And I mean, but yeah, you're right. If people don't like sweat or like this one lady, one mom that I try to get to join, she says, I don't like when people are up close in my face. I go, yeah, okay, it's not
No,
going to work for you
yeah, no,
at all.
not
Yeah,
for
at
you,
all,
yeah.
at all.
So it does attract a certain type of person. I will say, even though like it's crazy to me, I do think like jujitsu isn't for everybody, and I understand that, and I respect that. If if you could just find something that empowers you, whether that's your work or that's the gym, that's great. But I mean, the benefit of jujitsu is it's also really fun. So
I fully believe that too. And anybody everybody pretty much that I've seen stick it out has either gained some sort of health benefit, some mental benefit, like you said,
right,
empowerment, self-confidence. You're going to gain that. And even at the minimum, you get a brand new group of friends that are very supportive. Yeah. So you build community, like you said. So there's definitely a lot of benefits if you can stick it out.
I agree.
All right. So you talk some about people who've mentored you. Like I said, I always talk about mentorship at the end of the interview, and you've talked about a few that help guide you through your jujitsu, right? I just wanted to see if there's anyone else that you wanted to kind of acknowledge as a mentor in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think off the mats, non-jujitsu related, my mom and my dad are always like the biggest supporting um pillars of support in my life. And um s- s- especially, I mean, both my mom and my dad in different ways. But my dad was, he did do it all. He ran a business, he worked, he supported the household, but I still remember him being at every soccer game. He took me to every surfing tournament. My mom too, she was taking care of my grandma at the time, and she was still so involved in all our lives. But in the jujitsu on the mat realm, I think the only group of people that I did not mention yet is like how amazing the girl jujitsu scene is in Hawaii. And, I think like amongst any group, there can be some drama that percolates or happens and whatnot. And that's just going to happen anywhere you go. But overall, I will say, I think the female scene in jujitsu here on the island is amazing. And I've met some of the best women through the sport. And so I used to always say, I think the coolest girls are always either in academia or athletics. And I think that's the one benefit of traveling to compete is I've made friends with women in different states that, like you said, I would never have crossed paths with possibly. And we just clicked. And so I think in Hawaii, any girl that's like, hey, I'm getting ready for a tournament, they can text a handful of girls and they'll come and they'll train, they'll start a training camp, and everybody kind of like pitches and helps. And not to mention, like, some of the toughest girls I roll with are from Hawaii. So Hawaii girls are scary.
They're built different, right?
They're so sweet. They're so like cute with these like pretty little smiles, and then they get on the mat and you're just like, like, who are you? Can I piss you off? So yeah, they're feisty.
All right, Sarah. I want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to me and appreciate all that you share with me today. Hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
All right. Okay.